I'm Devika Devar and you're watching NewsX World. We begin with the headlines this hour. The death toll from the deadly earthquake in eastern Afghanistan has shot up to over 1,400 according to a government spokesman. At least 3,124 people have been reportedly injured following the disaster. Meanwhile, rescue efforts continue to save those stuck under the rubble. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is currently on tour in China for its military parade for the Second World War anniversary. This marks Kim Jong-un's first visit in 6 years. Meanwhile, Chinese officials, including Foreign Minister Wang Yi, have met with the North Korean leader, according to state media. During the meeting, Kim extended his gratitude towards Chinese President Xi Jinping for his hospitality during the visit. Brazil's Supreme Court has begun verdict deliberations in the trial of former President Jair Bolsonaro, who is accused of plotting a coup to attempt to retain power after he lost the 2022 election. Bolsonaro, who has won vocal support from US President Donald Trump and is under house arrest, is not expected to attend the hearing. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Beijing, where both leaders are attending a massive Chinese military parade marking 80 years since Japan's defeat in the Second World War. Meanwhile, the Russian president is also set to hold a series of meetings with world leaders, including China's Xi Jinping and others. The Israeli army is preparing to receive tens of thousands of reservists as it expands its military offensive in Gaza City. This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing to accelerate the operation despite reported warnings from senior officials. Indonesian police have fired tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters near two universities in the city of Bandung, according to authorities. This comes as 10 people have been killed since last week in the ongoing unrest. The protests began in the capital, Jakarta, targeting government spending such as enhanced perks for lawmakers, and have since spread nationwide. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson says that negotiations between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency have not yielded any results so far. During his weekly press conference, Ismail Baghei urged Europeans to rethink their stance without the influence of Israel and the United States. French actress Charlotte Arnould has posted on social media that film star Gerard Depardieu will face trial for allegedly raping her. Meanwhile, Depardieu, under formal investigation since 2022, has denied any wrongdoing. Our top focus: a fresh 5.2 magnitude earthquake has struck northeastern Afghanistan. This is reportedly the second earthquake since yesterday that has rocked the region. The second earthquake affected Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. The earlier 6.0 magnitude earthquake on Sunday, also centered near Jalalabad in the Nangarhar province, has left more than 1,400 people dead and at least 3,000 people injured. Over 8,000 homes have been destroyed. As per the reports, most casualties are from the Kunar province. The rescue efforts are intensifying as hundreds are still believed to be trapped under the rubble. The aid workers have said that the blocked and damaged roads are making it extremely difficult to reach remote areas, creating obstructions in the rescue operations. The UN's humanitarian coordinator has warned that the earthquake could impact hundreds of thousands of people, marking the urgent need for relief. This is reportedly Afghanistan's deadliest earthquake since 2023 that claimed more than 2,000 lives. Listen in to what UN humanitarian coordinator had to say.
800 plus individuals have sadly perished, and we are looking at over 2,000 injured, and the numbers are definitely going to increase as far as we can see. Also remembering that in 22 and in 23, we had devastating earthquakes in Afghanistan. So looking at the stats, looking at the remoteness and the topography, which is extremely challenging and remote, we think potentially the impacted individuals could go up to almost into the hundreds of thousands. We have been really reaching out to the international community to step it up, but it is a race against time. We don't have enough of the essential items on the ground for sure. And that's because, as I said, the resources have not been there. And we've been dealing with multiple crises. We had 1.7 plus million refugees and returnees come back to this country just this year. I'm not counting last year.
Mr. Amrullah Osmani Afghan, a journalist from Kabul, joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Osmani, I have to understand from you firstly, what's the situation on the ground right now?
First of all, thank you for having me in my special greetings to the guests. A strong earthquake hit eastern Afghanistan on late Sunday night. It was a very painfully bad event in Afghanistan history. So the earthquake happened in Kunar in Nangarhar province while the people were sleeping in the night. On that earthquake, many houses, the damage in most of the houses completely destroyed. And according to the reports, many people unfortunately killed and injured on that event.
Mr. Osmani, what is the biggest hurdle right now as far as the rescue and relief operations are concerned?
So according to the reports of the government spokesman in local sources, it's getting increasing, but the report that we got from the sources, 1,400 people died and 3,000 people injured on that event.
And how exactly are authorities at this point in time dealing with the devastation, Mr. Osmani? Because we've just learned that there's been a second earthquake. What exactly can you tell our viewers about the second earthquake? What's the damage so far?
So according to the second earthquake, there is no special information about that yet.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Osmani, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World. With that update and perspective. Meanwhile, in other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing, accompanied by his daughter Kim Joo-ae, according to the official Korean Central News Agency. He reportedly arrived at 4 p.m. local time in Beijing and was greeted by Kai Ki, China's number 5 ranked official, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. The North Korean leader will join Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russia's Vladimir Putin, and 24 other leaders at the huge spectacle to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. Reportedly, it is only Kim Jong-un's second reported trip abroad in 6 years and the first to China since 2019. Kim Jong-un is expected to use the trip to hold face-to-face meetings with both the Chinese and Russian presidents. So Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing by armored train to attend a military parade celebrating the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Where the former trilateral summit has not been confirmed, observers believe that Kim will be holding bilateral meetings with both Xi and Putin. This gathering is widely seen as a public display of solidarity amongst the three nations against the United States. The presence of the three leaders together is expected to send a strong visual statement of deepening alignment between China, Russia, and North Korea. And this is particularly significant given the ongoing war in Ukraine and the heightened tensions with the United States. Viewers, this is Kim Jong-un's first attendance at a multilateral event. It is an opportunity for Kim Jong-un to seek economic support from China and further strengthen security cooperation with Russia. Mr. Raymond Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Vickery, I want to understand from you, sir. I've just highlighted one particular aspect of Kim Jong-un being in China. It's his first attendance at a multilateral event. Does this, Mr. Vickery, signal a move to break out of international isolation somewhere and expand North Korea's diplomatic relationships?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It seems to me that this is best understood as a part of the Chinese government's push to show that it is the world leader. This comes on the heels of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in which there were pictures and visuals taken of all of the authoritarian leaders in the world, but not having Kim Il-jung there. He was even too toxic for many of the members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to have him there. Yes, he would like, Kim would like to break out of complete isolation, but his chief patron is China. And this fits the China narrative that the United States was not instrumental in the defeat of Japan in World War II, but it was because of the Chinese and Korean resistance. So this is an opportunity for Kim, but it is more of an opportunity and part of the overall plan of China to show that its opposition to the United States, that its authoritarian state capitalism approach is the wave of the future. Unfortunately, our president, Donald Trump, has played right into that by treating friend and foe alike and not aligning with the democratic values which have provided leadership since World War II.
Mr. Vikri, then I also want to understand from you. Russia is heavily sanctioned by the West, and it is increasingly, therefore, prioritized ties with North Korea, which has also been providing military support for the war in Ukraine. In your perspective, what's the message here for the United States of America through this particular meet?
Well, the message is that the United States is not effective in controlling or ameliorating the authoritarian regimes in the world, in Russia, in China, and in North Korea. It's an opportunity for those countries to paper over differences which they have and present a solidarity image to the rest of the world. Unfortunately, as I said, we in the United States under President Trump have abdicated a position of leadership in the free world and standing up against authoritarianism. China, Russia, and now North Korea are seizing this opportunity to show that, or to try to show that they are the wave of the future.
Absolutely. Mr. Vikri, stay on with us as we shift our focus from China, North Korea, and Russia to what's happening in Brazil. The Supreme Court has entered the final phase of a landmark trial against former President Jair Bolsonaro, who stands accused of plotting to remain in power after losing the 2022 election. The closing arguments began on Tuesday, the 2nd of September, with Presiding Judge Alexandre de Moraes emphasizing the strength of Brazil's democratic institutions. Listen in to what he had to say.
A Corte só tem a lamentar que na história republicana brasileira se tenha novamente tentado um golpe de Estado, atentando-se contra as instituições e a própria democracia, pretendendo-se a instalação de um estado de exceção e uma verdadeira ditadura. Existindo provas acima de qualquer dúvida razoável, as ações penais serão julgadas procedentes e os réus condenados. Havendo prova da inocência ou mesmo qualquer dúvida razoável sobre a culpabilidade dos réus, os réus serão absolvidos. Assim se faz a justiça. Esse é o papel do Supremo Tribunal Federal, julgar com imparcialidade e aplicar a justiça a cada dos casos concretos, independentemente de ameaças ou coações, ignorando pressões internas ou externas.
Meanwhile, the trial has ignited tensions with the Bolsonaro supporters staging demonstrations outside his residence. The verdict is expected by the 12th of September. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has condemned the trial and called it a witch hunt, sanctioning Justice de Moraes and his colleagues. Mr. Raymond Vickery with us on the broadcast. Mr. Vickery, I have to begin by asking you, regardless of the trial's verdict, what are some of the long-term implications for the Brazilian right-wing movement?
Well, it seems to me that you have to step back and see that building peace and prosperity throughout the world, whether it be in Brazil, United States, India, or elsewhere, requires an adherence to the rule of law. And in regard to Bolsonaro and the reaction of President Trump, there's a very strong reaction because Bolsonaro really modeled his attempt to overturn the results of election on what President Trump tried to do on January the 6th, 2021. So President Trump cannot countenance this and has tried to stop it by imposing the very highest tariff, along with India, in the world. It's a very unfortunate development, but we will see if values underlying democracy will be able to triumph in this case, and that justice will be done, as opposed to the Trump approach of trying to use the courts to seek retribution against one's enemies. So this is a question of fundamental values, which is going forward in the Brazilian context and is important to the entire world, which values democratic freedoms.
All right, Mr. Vickery. Then is the U.S. approach more likely to embolden Bolsonaro's allies, or could it be seen as an attack on Brazil's sovereignty, potentially even backfiring?
Well, I think it has backfired, not with Bolsonaro's supporter. They're kind of like the Make America Great Again core of Trump's constituency, in which he said in the past that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue in New York and not be held to account for it. So yes, the Bolsonaro hardcore will attempt to use this as some support for their position. But overall, Brazilians, like others, whether they be in India or in Europe, do not take kindly to this kind of interference in domestic matters, which is a mainstay of the Donald Trump position in trying to show that he is the decision maker in the world. So yes, it has backfired, and it's going to have long-term adverse results in U.S.-Brazilian relations, just as it's having in the rest of the world, where these strong armed tactics are tried by our president.
All right, Mr. Vickery, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World with that perspective. And we leave this story behind to move on to more news. Israel is intensifying its military buildup ahead of a planned offensive to capture Gaza City. Tens of thousands of reservists are being mobilized as Israel prepares to expand combat operations in the densely populated city, home to nearly 1 million people and currently under a declared famine. Despite international calls to halt the offensive, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has reaffirmed the mission's objectives to neutralize Hamas and secure the release of hostages. On the ground, Palestinians face worsening conditions with scarce resources, while the United Nations and humanitarian organizations warn that it would be nearly impossible to carry out any evacuation safely. Meanwhile, some Reservists have held a press conference declaring their refusal to continue serving in the military and voiced their opposition to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, as well as the planned offensive to capture Gaza City. Listen in.
As IDF veterans who served in this war and care for the future of our country, it is our patriotic duty to refuse to take part in this war. Furthermore, it is the duty of every Zionist to refuse to support this war. Any act of legitimizing continuing hostilities over a hostage deal is inherently a betrayal of the hostages and a betrayal to the Israeli people. It is time for a complete and binding ceasefire hostage deal. It is time for total accountability. Security experts, including the sitting Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, have condemned the plan to occupy Gaza as an action which will cost us dearly in the lives of our hostages and soldiers. And of course, it will also cost in the lives of uninvolved Gazan civilians. It is by the same values that drove us on October 7th to defend our homes and our loved ones that drive us now to say, enough is enough.
Ms. Xavier Abouid, political analyst, joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Abouid, I have to begin by asking you, we've just heard some of the reservists in Israel who've refused to now serve in the war, and this is coming as Israel has appealed to more and more people to join the military in order to execute its plan of taking over Gaza and releasing the hostages and ending Hamas. How do you think Israel will continue to convince its own civilian population and others to continue this war?
Thank you, Devika. I think, first of all, I don't think anyone could really believe that the goal of occupying Gaza, destroying Gaza house by house, which is basically what the Israeli forces are doing now at the Sabra neighborhood and even the Zaytune neighborhood nearby the old city of Gaza, it's about releasing the captives. If Benjamin Netanyahu was interested in the captives, he had a plan that was boycotted by Israel, a ceasefire that he broke, and now he has had an American plan that was accepted on one side by Hamas, we have to say this, and Israel has not even responded to it. So the only way that captives have been released in exchange of prisoners have been through negotiations that Netanyahu doesn't want. I think the goal of occupying Gaza City, it goes more regarding what some members of the Israeli cabinet have been saying, which is the goal of forcible displacement or ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, hundreds of thousands to be kicked out of Palestine, particularly to Egypt.
Mr. Abouid, I also want to understand from you, how do you think Israel will continue to justify its offensive given the current humanitarian aid crisis in Gaza? And how do you think it's going to continue justifying that to the world?
I don't think that there are any justification that they can present. In fact, some of the closest allies Israel has, like, for example, Germany, even though Germany has had a very negative role in blocking European Union action to hold Israel accountable, they have also taken their own actions, like, for example, not trading weapons with Israel that may be used in Gaza. I think all we are facing now, the famine, the humanitarian crisis that has been created for a political decision of the Israeli government, is something that does not have any military justification, any security justification, and therefore it will be very difficult for Israeli officials to present this. And let's remember that this is a case that it's before the International Court of Justice for genocide, that we have many elements that add every day to the definition of genocide. Just yesterday, we had the most important organization of scholars on genocide worldwide declaring that what's happening is a genocide, and therefore I think it's Benjamin Netanyahu is prioritizing his domestic goals, hiding himself from prosecution for corruption cases, rather than the standing of his own country, and of course, the situation of the captives by, in this case, killing more and more Palestinians.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Abouid, for joining us on NewsX World. In other news, the violent protests in Indonesia continue for another week. The Indonesian police have fired tear gas into crowds of protesters near two universities in Bandung. The incident has taken place near the campuses of the Islamic University of Bandung and near the Pasundan University. Here is what the students have said about the police action. Listen in.
Aparat kepolisian melewati depan kampus Unpas itu sekitar jam setengah 11 malam lebih, 23.40-an. Nah, jadi kondisinya setelah pada polisi itu lewat, kita kan di sini lagi maksudnya diam, lagi membantulah para medis yang sedang bekerja gitu, Pul. Nah, setelah dari kejadian itu terjadi tembakan gas air mata dengan 40 lebih bukti ini asal.
Meanwhile, the student body at the Islamic University of Bandung has accused security forces of seeking to silence dissent, saying that they've brutally attacked the campus with tear gas. The university rector too condemned the actions of the police. Listen in.
Menembakkan gas air mata ke area kampus itu adalah tindakan yang dilarang secara hukum. Yang pertama. Kemudian yang kedua adalah mengutuk keras tindakan represif para aparat kepolisian di area kampus Unisba. Dan kami mohon Polda untuk mengamankan kampus Unisba ini menjadi kampus yang tentunya bersih dan bukan sebagai basis tindakan-tindakan anarkis.
The Delhi protests in Indonesia have killed at least 8 over the past week, while 20 others remain missing. Protests first broke out on the 25th of August over public anger at perks and benefits being given to lawmakers, including a controversial housing allowance. However, tensions later rose sharply after a 21-year-old motorcycle taxi driver was run over by a police vehicle at a protest site. Unrest quickly spread from Jakarta to other cities, turning into Indonesia's most violent protest in decades. In response, President Prabowo Subianto has scraped some of the lawmakers' perks in a bid to calm the situation, but the demonstrators continue to protest. Major Rajan Kochar with us on the broadcast. Major Kochar, what do the protests in Indonesia now tell us about the larger geopolitical implications?
Thank you, Devika. I think President Subianto has not handled these protests in a very professional manner. When you see visuals of ordinary citizens carrying the wounded, strengthens public perception that the state is using excessive force. This can lead to a broadening of the protests, and now I think beyond the students and activists, it will draw in families, labor unions, and community groups. Another aspect is you see this power of the social media. You will find these images being flashed on the social media, and it becomes harder for the authorities then to control this narrative. And the next day you will see there would be a much larger, turnouts of the population taking place. So right now, I feel the government is facing a strong credibility test. If the hospitals are going to be filled up with the protest-related casualties, and the independent verification shows brutality, domestic and international calls for accountability will spike. So your specific question on the international fallout, I think it's already started happening. United Nations is asking now for intervention. United Nations is asking for reports on what is actually happening in Indonesia. And what is if I do some kind of a scenario building, what I visualize in the next 48 to 72 hours is these protests are going to swell up in Jakarta, Bandung, Depok, and Surabaya. There'll be more spontaneous gatherings, because moment you see these images of the dead and injured, you will see that things getting out of control. And once the things go out of control, you'll find the security forces applying more pressure, like, there'll be curfews, roadblocks, and internet restrictions. And if I do the scenario building for a medium term, maybe 1 to 2 weeks, this demand, what we are talking about for the lawmakers, those perks are there, additional your benefits are there, and the
Yes.
disparity is there. It is going to shift this focus from that point of the grievance. It is going to shift to the justice for the victims. The civil society groups, like Contrast is their labor unions and the women groups, are going to coordinate legal action, and all the international actors. Now, the specific part of a question where the UN, the Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all the ASEAN partners, you see, this is most important now. The ASEAN partners may ask for escalation of scrutiny if the casualties are going to climb, because President Subianto will need to balance the order with certain kind of administrative control at the same time to give concessions. So I think we'll have to watch now what kind of fatalities are going to happen in the next 24 hours. And there are also reports of disappearances from hospitals. The security forces are removing the injured people from the hospitals, and this is going to create another kind of situation. And my last point is about strategic communication and misinformation, because whenever we find like this, there'll be doctored videos now, because we have also had experiences of a similar kind of situation in our own country. So you will have unverified or doctored videos which would deepen the unrest and complicate if any amount of resolution is going to be there. So I think it's a great challenge for the administration, because the situation is already spiraling out of control, and with the international your voices also coming to play, like I mentioned, the ASEAN countries, the
Yes.
Human Rights Watch, the Amnesty International. So I think so this will have to be handled very, very carefully and with a lot of sensitivity.
Absolutely.
Devika.
On that note, Pejan Rajakosha, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World. And this is all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more updates from around the world.